Hello friends, hope you're doing well. Today is the first lesson of our Educational Groups series, which covers the extruder machine, and it's titled Overview. We'll start with the main components of the extruder machine. I hope this training course will be useful for you. I suggest you subscribe to us so you don't miss the next course, which I've written the title for here. That's because, despite its simplicity, the extruder machine is a very important device in industries that work with polymer materials. I also recommend following my Monday training sessions, where I discuss the challenges faced by industries working with polymer materials. Hopefully, by combining these two courses, you'll be able to strengthen your understanding. Get the best results in the quality of your products. As I mentioned, our free course is quite brief, so we have to present the topics in a summarized headline format. Specifically, the extruder has a comprehensive 600 section course that covers a lot of details, which I've tried to fully explain in the main course. Here I'm forced to just touch on the main points. If you find this useful, you can purchase our main course, or we can also hold online workshops for you Now let's move on to introducing the different parts of the extruder machine. Well, friends, for your reference, I have now placed an image here on the screen that provides a much more detailed view of the extruder device we are discussing. And I will explain each of these parts in detail in the following slides, except for the section, actually, the screws and the cylinder section. To clarify, we will be temporarily skipping the heater and the screws sections. As I mentioned in the previous slide, we will discuss these two sections in much greater detail later on. God willing, we plan to cover them either next Wednesday or the Wednesday after that. For today, our agenda is quite full with other material, so I ask that you are prepared to take detailed notes, because every single small point that I'm mentioning is important for you, and I'm sure you're dealing with them, and following them has a big impact on the quality of your product. Look, the extruder machine is in many ways a very simple device. You pour a material into this machine, it melts, and in the end, it gives you an output with which you produce your product. But in a way, think of it like cooking food. That is exactly how you add these materials, under what process, how is it done? For example, do you cook it? It really matters a lot. In fact, sometimes it can even affect your product's quality by up to 70%. That's why I've designed a completely special course for the extruder machine. And don't think it's that simple, that even if the extruder machine seller gives you some numbers, like add this amount or in this way to the machine, that's all there is to it. You can't necessarily get the desired result. No. In fact, because polymer materials are sensitive to many factors, it's possible that you might not even notice the poor quality of your product right now. When you deliver the product to your customer 6 months or a year later, the feedback you get from your customer won't be good. As I said, I am compelled to briefly talk about the main points today, but every single point I mention is important, so please pay attention to them. The main structure of the machine actually has a hopper section. There is also a cylinder and heater section. It also has a screw section, and we have single screw, twin screw, and double screw types, which we will explain about 70% in detail. It also has a die and mold section, a motor section, and a section for the control system and coolers. I will start explaining each of these one by one from the next slide. I will explain these without wasting any extra time. You can easily find information about the basic function of each of these parts on the internet. So in this video, I'm going to focus more on the subtle points and key details that you need to know about these components. Now, for some of these parts, for example, just the hopper section, I have a 20-minute video in the main training where I only explain about it. But here I have to summarize this explanation in just a minute or two. If you find the information I'm sharing useful, you can get our complete training package. Let's move on to the next slide. Friends, the first topic we're going to talk about is the funnel. The funnel actually plays a very important role in the extruder machine. Before the materials enter the funnel, just like in all factories, there is a mixing machine where the raw materials are mixed together, and then they need to enter the extruder machine through this funnel. This stage is very important, and it's not like you can just pour all the materials you plan to use into the mixer at once. I want you to really pay attention to this point. I spent 20 minutes in the main video just talking about the mixing machine because there are a lot of subtle details involved. But here I have to wrap up this topic in just 1 or 2 minutes and move on. So I'll just mention the main points briefly. If you feel that the things I'm saying are important, you can actually get our main course, because this section really determines the quality and characteristics of many of your products. The order in which the ingredients are added to the mixer is very important, and your knowledge of your materials is also crucial. That is, there are some materials that need to rest for an hour or two after being mixed in the mixer. You should know there are certain materials that, as a matter of fact, should be the very last components to be added into the mixer. For instance, this should only happen after all the other additives have been fully incorporated. And additionally, the particular speed at which you choose to mix all the materials together is also extremely important to consider. For example, if you mix a material like polyvinyl chloride or PVC for an excessively long time, it will undergo a process known as thermal degradation. This is a serious issue that will cause significant problems and ultimately ruin your valuable materials. All of these things, like bubbles that might form in your product and many other issues. In fact, what happens right here in the mixer is the single most important step, because at this very moment you are determining its ultimate fate. For example, I had an experience once. I remember one time I made a change to my process and added the titanium dioxide to the mixer after the lubricant, and the color quality of my final product improved quite significantly. So this experience really demonstrates that it is absolutely crucial for you to be fully aware of the precise timing and sequence of when you are adding your materials into the mix. Now, in the course that we're currently working on, I give a brief explanation about additives. I recommend that you definitely watch those videos. And actually, we even have a separate course just about additives. It's one of our main courses that you can get, where I've explained each of these points, what to add and when, in more detail and more thoroughly for you. The speed at which you pour the materials into the funnel is also very important. If you pour the materials in with too much force and speed right from the start, it will significantly lower the quality of your product and may lead to things like product burning, very high energy consumption, and so on. On the other hand, if you do it too slowly, it will also affect the volume of your produced material. It can also cause bubbles and other issues. In fact, it's better to say that nearly 50% of the economic savings you can achieve in polymer production is all limited to this extruder machine, if not even more than that. And it plays a very, very crucial role in your economic savings. And all of this comes down to your complete understanding of your raw materials and your full knowledge of this machine. In fact, these are the critical points that you really need to pay close attention to. The mixing temperature and the moisture content of your materials, the supervision that the operator has in the additives section, specifically when adding materials. First, consider the specific order in which you add the various materials into the mix. Then, there's the precise speed at which you mix them all together. And equally important is the exact timing of when your materials enter the hopper and proceed into the extruder, as all of these factors can completely change the final outcome of your production. That's why this section is going to be a very important part. The next topic in the next part is the cylinder section. A cylinder is not just a simple metal tube. The alloy material used inside the cylinder is extremely important. So, preferably, try to use cylinder alloys that are resistant to wear. This is because as a result of mixing different materials together over an extended period of time, the main body of your cylinder could potentially become damaged. To give you a specific example, imagine for a moment that you add a substance like calcium carbonate into the mix. If that's in your mixture, it will actually cause a lot of wear inside your cylinder. The length of the cylinder is also very important. A short cylinder length can result in incomplete mixing for you. Conversely, it is extremely important to recognize that a particularly long cylinder length can very easily cause your materials to begin to burn and consequently become seriously and irreversibly damaged. So be sure to discuss this with an expert. Don't just settle for a company trying to sell you their machine in any way possible. Be sure to consult with an expert or someone who is fully knowledgeable about this subject, both before and after they present you with the specifications of the machine they intend to sell you. This way you can choose a cylinder that will give you the best efficiency and the highest quality. The next important point is that the cleanliness inside the cylinder has a significant impact on the quality and cleanliness of the product you are producing. And even the cylinder body itself is very important because of the thermal zones you are using. I'm mentioning these to you in bullet points now. Also, if there are any further explanations, I can't discuss them with you here in this course. I will have to, God willing, explain those to you in the main course. The next topic is heaters, which in my opinion are the heart of the extruder and the heart of your production process. That's why I've dedicated a separate video just for it. The date of this tutorial is actually sometime in October. I highly recommend that you definitely follow it. Now, if you subscribe to us, this video will be sent to you automatically and you can watch it at the right time. That's why here, to make sure there's enough time for the other important sections, I won't go into too much detail about it right now. We have different settlement areas, and the individual settings and the map of these settlement areas are very important. God willing, in the video that I will present on the 1st of October, I will give you enough explanations about this. The screw section is actually another one of the very, very essential parts of the extruder machine, and we have both single screw and twin screw types. Regarding the different shapes of screws and so on, I will fully explain them to you in the video, God willing, next Monday. As I mentioned, since this video is supposed to cover other important topics, I try not to repeat similar content in two similar videos. So please allow me to discuss this in detail next week. However, given that our primary discussion today has centered around the essential components of the extruder, I believe it is also important to take a moment and briefly touch upon this particular section as well. Well, we've now reached another critical part of the extruder machine, which is the input and output section actually. The temperature at the die exit is very important. Symmetry in the die section is actually very important. The pressure that you are going to apply to the machine there is very important. Cleanliness of your die section is also very important so that no hard particles actually remain there, and even a 5-degree change in temperature, for example, in one product I experienced, significantly increased the product's clarity. So any small change you make in the die section can have a very big effect on your final product output. When I'm talking about the part and sharing my experience, I want to focus more on the die, especially since I'm also working with film, because these aspects are very important. When your output is supposed to be in the form of film, you definitely need two operators, especially when you're producing a lot of film on both sides of the output section to adjust the screws in those areas. That's because many of the issues that occur are mistakenly thought by the operator to be related to the thermal zones, when in fact that's not the case. The problem is happening at a screw, and you need to adjust your screws properly. There have been cases, for example, where the right side of the film would always tear, and simply adjusting the screw completely solved the problem. Or for instance, if the thickness around the edges was much greater, again, this was related to the adjustment of the screws in the die section. Or if the middle areas had less clarity or had spots, again, this was due to the screws in the middle section of the die. So, in my opinion, you need to have your most skilled operators working at the output section, because even if you produce the best materials, if you do not know how to handle the output section, it can ruin everything. The presence of air, lines on the product, and any other issues all arise in this section. So it's very important that you have enough knowledge about what needs to be done in the output and die sections. I tried to cover this in about 20 to 30 minutes in the main video where we talk about this section. If you feel that the summary I've provided here is useful, you can get our main video where we go into detail about how to adjust these screws. Watch the full tutorial about this. The right pressure in this part is very important. Unfortunately, I've often seen that most operators who are producing film tend to make things easier for themselves. They just cut off the surrounding edge and in the end trim it. But by doing this, they're both using a lot more raw material and generating a lot of waste, and it also affects the quality of their products. If you work professionally in that area, you can produce a very clean, symmetrical, and good film without any issues. Of course, it's also very important which company you get this dye from. There are machines that actually give you a warning at that point if the settings are off or if there's asymmetry. As I said, there's no single setting for every polymer, every type of material, or every type of film. These are all different. Unfortunately, I can't go into detail about these in today's video. If you want, you can get the main video where I explain all of this to you in full. The next topic is the engine and the cooling system. Actually, in the engine section, as you know, its job is to rotate those muscles. Your high electricity consumption is actually determined here. Therefore, it is better to use advanced engines that operate with high efficiency so you can actually reduce your electricity consumption. Adjusting the engine speed is very important. It's very important. It's very important because all that mixing and all the rules we're actually talking about in the oxidation discussion, that mixing speed, meaning if the speed is low, it might not achieve complete mixing. If the speed is high, it could put pressure on the machine and severely affect the quality of your product. In both cases, you actually end up producing a low quality product. And adjusting the speed is so sensitive that, for example, even if you increase your motor speed by just 5 revolutions per minute, sometimes you'll see it can affect your mole pressure by up to 20%. And this is a very sensitive matter and requires professional training. I recommend that you definitely get our main training course and gain sufficient information on this topic, or consult someone on the production line who is fully knowledgeable about this subject. And the last topic I'm going to talk about here is cooling systems. We have 2 types of cooling systems. There's the fan system, which is much cheaper but not accurate at all. And then there are water and oil circulation systems, which I highly recommend because you have much more control over them. And in fact, for sensitive materials and high quality results, these systems are much more suitable. Look, when it comes to the cooling section, the balance between the heating and cooling parts is very important. I've seen this happen a lot. I'm sure if you've worked with the machine, you've definitely witnessed this yourself. There have been times when, for example, smoke started coming out of the machine and the user immediately turned it off. Then they turn on the cooling system. Look, if something like this is happening, it's related to the raw materials section I mentioned to you. It's in that initial mixing process I told you about. It's in the way the feeding is done, as I explained before. It could even be, for example, that there's a problem with your motor speed and it has nothing to do with the cooling system or any fault in your machine's cooling system, that your machine is overheating and running. So if everything goes smoothly and all the settings are correct, you will never experience something like this because the machine automatically maintains the necessary balance. And remember, it's not just about setting the temperature points. Maintaining and stabilizing the temperature point is very important, and keeping this temperature point stable and steady is related to the cooling system. And a very important point, which I will definitely discuss in that section, is to remember that it's not just the temperature point that generates heat for you. It is important to remember that in any case, the rotational speed of the twisting device itself will also generate a significant amount of heat. Therefore, with this knowledge, it is absolutely necessary to properly adjust the cooling system. Additionally, the operator who is working with this system must be in constant coordination with the person who is responsible for actually regulating the various heat zones. This is all done so that you can successfully carry out your production process as smoothly and as steadily as possible without encountering any unforeseen issues or problems. Look, now I've explained the structure of the extruder machine. Here I have to draw a conclusion. Until next week, we'll talk about the heater section, about the bodies. Then actually we'll give some explanations about the screw systems of the extruder machine. But obviously I'll have to repeat those for you as well. Nevertheless, I suggest you subscribe to us so that those videos will automatically be sent to you after they're released and you can benefit from them. I hope these tutorials can truly make a difference in your production, because being aware of how the extruder works is really, really, really important for the quality of your products, and we are fully prepared to both give you advice in this area and hold training courses for you. And if you have a problem that we haven't been able to solve for you so far, we can solve it for you. I'm repeating this again because it has a huge impact on your energy consumption. It also affects your economic savings, and I suggest that if you work in polymers, you definitely get our training packages on this topic. The things we actually teach are things that truly come from life. At least in the 20 years I've been working with polymer materials, I've lived with them, experienced them firsthand, faced these problems and solved them, and you won't find these things written for you in any book.